Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we are still on chapter 4 of this book, Positive Islamic Psychology, a Transcendent Model to Achieve Peace, Happiness and Success in the 21st Century. And we have our Positive Islamic Psychology model, which is actually an Islamic psychology model, which will inshallah come up with Principles of Islamic Psychology, a book later on. But what is important is today we are continuing our aspect of learning, of the laws of learning, of classical and operant conditioning, and how reinforcement and scheduling affects our behavior. So today I'm going to talk about student behavior. You know, this is a very typical situation where how fixed interval or variable interval schedule affects student behavior, especially their mood or their mode of learning, as well as their motivation of learning, and why they have to sit for exams, and how they view exams from the perspective of just mere chore or negative kind of worldview to a positive worldview based on knowledge and reward. So these are all psychological issues in terms of conditioning and the laws of learning, which we can use actually to transform education of the Muslims, because traditionally we Muslims has been using quite very punishment-based type of learning, because if you go to any madrasa in many parts of the world, it is the cane. The students are being caned every day because that is the kind of punishment that they go through to force them to learn. All right. So that approach, I think, is irrelevant, and it's not even following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad SAW. But somehow it became part of the madrasa systems in terms of learning, and that's why this road of learning is very, very negative, is punishment based, it is not useful. But how are we going to change? So some approach here, we can use psychology, the laws of learning, and I'm give you some pointers here. So from this book, I just read a few paragraphs, Professor Muhammad Madi Jenkins writing. Fixed interval and variable interval schedule and their effects on student behavior. On the question whether there is any common human behavior that is governed by a fixed interval reinforcement, I can say that many schools condition students to study on a fixed interval schedule. When exams are scheduled to be given on a certain date in the future, these act as a fixed interval. For instance, an exam may be planned for a month in the future. Response under consideration is the student's study behavior. The schedule is a fixed interval, for example, 1 month. Many students, after hearing that the exam is 1 month away, will do no studying at all for 2 or 3 weeks. Then they may do some small amount of study until a day or two before the exam, when a high rate of student study behavior begins, and many will stay up most of the night before the exam studying at a very high rate, that's called cramming, trying to cram. Reinforcement of this schedule hopefully means a good and at least a passing grade in the exam. The study behavior pattern of student is almost identical to the lever pressing behavior of a rat on a fixed interval schedule. So you imagine the students are actually replicating, the experiment where each time the rat presses the lever, it gets food. So this is exactly the kind of conditioning that the student behavior is doing. Why? Because they know that the exam is 1 month away and they couldn't be bothered. It is because a negative view of exams. They see exams as a punishment, taking examination as a punishment, or they even see acquisition of knowledge as a punishment. So we have to start from zero base. How we can inculcate within the ummah, especially our preschool children, the love of knowledge. And once they have the love of knowledge, they become lifelong learners, because in the 21st century, you must have the ability to change in terms of even your knowledge, your career, and so on, because it is not you learn something and it will last forever, because science, technology is moving so fast that you have to maybe change your career and knowledge pattern over your lifetime. That's where we have this lifelong learning. But you must begin with the understanding the acquisition knowledge is a joy, it's a happiness, it's something that you love to do. So how are we going to change this? Using the laws of learning, one of the very basic things is to have a variable schedule interval. Moreover, fixed interval schedule condition behavior into a very distinctive pattern. And the fact that study behavior is taught by means of fixed interval scheduling is just one of the many examples how ignorance of even the most simplistic learning principles limit personal development and create various human social problems. However, if exams are given on a variable interval schedule, the student will never know when they expect an exam. So variable schedule means it can be today, it can be 1 week, it can be 1 month later, it can be 1 semester later, it can be anything. So it is a variable, it's not fixed. Once in a while, the student would be presented with an exam when they show up in class. So they have these quizzes, and then these quizzes is part of the whole assessment system, including their project paper and so on. Many students in this type of institution tends to do some studying almost every day. They are afraid not to study at all because each day they may have an exam on that day. They don't study intensely each day because there may be no exam that day, and they would receive no reward for studying. A steady but low rate of studying would be developed by a variable interval exam schedule. Alright, so this is where they have this variable, you can adjust it, and once you do that, the student know that they would be exam at any time, quizzes at any time. Suddenly they come, there's an exam there, and then that's it, they have to take it. So, but to make this successful, you have to change the mindset. That means a variable schedule approach is useful so that they are always on their toe, but small measure of reinforcement and reward in terms of the love of knowledge. Because if it is just based on a variable interval schedule, it will not be good, because a lot or most students view examination as a punishment. So we have to change the idea that examination is not a punishment. Examination is a way to assess your progression towards knowledge, towards success in life, and so on. So that is the prerequisite approach that we have to use, using again the laws of learning. How we're going to use, for example, like in our Khalifah method, we use this idea that, oh, you love knowledge, Allah is the creator of all knowledge, and you love knowledge as a Caliph of Allah on this earth. So because of that, we have first to make ourselves knowledgeable. That means we try to find knowledge and find the joy of seeking knowledge, and then secondly, the joy of sharing knowledge with others. And finally, you will understand that life is based on understanding of the principles of knowledge, so that we can know the greatest of all knowledge, that is the knowledge of understanding the deen of Islam and the knowledge of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a progression that you start from preschool. Alright, so once you do that, then they would see examination as a passing thing, because it's just an exam, but then they would then study because they know they want to have a decent grade. So for example, so receiving maximum reward is primary, but while obtaining the maximum reinforcement, the secondary desire is to achieve this goal while expending as little energy as possible. When the amount of reward is unlimited, as is knowledge, the study behavior while still striving for maximum efficiency achieves maximum reward by maximum expenditure of energy. Ideally, students will not be studying only to do well in exam, but they will study in order to acquire knowledge, and the result of the exam should be secondary to the reward of the acquired knowledge. Alright, so this is where the whole psychology of examination, how we can use positive Islamic psychology or the Islamic psychology model to have the laws of learning specific for example, student. How are we going to develop a system? For example, you have this Piaget system, you have the Montessori system for preschool children, how they acquire knowledge. A lot of them are very good philosophical foundation of motivational aspects of teaching and learning, and they use all this variable scheduling approach to give a lot of reward. Very little punishment, but a lot of reward. So you develop a positive worldview. So we can use that as a basis. Alright, from preschool upwards to primary and secondary school. So the students will not view first examination as a bore, as a chore, as a punishment, but examination as part of their progression in the search of knowledge. And when doing so, this variable interval schedule will give them the basis of a motivational approach. So that it's not a fixed schedule, it's motivational, but you can have even a combined system where you have some fixed approach exam schedule towards one end of semester, and then the variable approach to have class assessment and so on, and the combination of the fixed interval examination and the variable interval examination and the project papers and assessment will then become part of the whole learning process, holistic learning process that we are going to introduce, inshallah. So as more and more researchers come onto our group to produce this kind of understanding. Inshallah, there will be some who will pick this up as a motivational tool, as a way forward to develop a model for preschool, primary and secondary for their master's or PhD studies in developing the laws of learning specific to motivation of Muslim students in the understanding and seeking of knowledge in a motivational approach that will give them the best of success in this world and the hereafter, inshallah.